Welcome to our discussion on borrowing money. We're going to look at how to calculate monthly payments and how to calculate credit card payments. That's the really tricky one. Monthly payments is pretty easy. A grace period is just a period of time where no interest accrues on a debt. And then the minimum payment is the minimum amount that the lender makes you pay each month. And just know that this amount is typically just equal to either a percentage of the total balance, or a lot of times it's just equal to how much interest is earned. So that way your balance never goes down and basically you never stop paying them back. So the number of fixed payments required to pay off credit card debt is, like I said, it's tricky. You have to use logs. So make sure you've got either a calculator that has a log button, or you know how to do logs in Excel or Google Sheets or something like that. But you have to be able to use the log button. So you're going to take, and by the way, this is log base 10, right? Because whenever we have a log without a base, it's just assumed to be base 10. So you have the negative log base 10 of 1 minus R over N times A over payment. So A is the amount, right? Total amount owed. And P is your payments, R is still your interest rate, N is the number of compounds per month or number of payments, number of compounds per year or the number of payments per year. So in this case, it's going to be 12 because pretty much you're always doing monthly payments. And then you've got log of 1 plus R over N. Not an easy thing to do by hand. Definitely you can't do it by hand with the log pieces. You could move this stuff around and kind of play with it a little bit with algebra to make the equation look simpler before you plugged into the calculator, but it's probably fine just the way it is. So here's an example that we can use. Assume you want to buy a new computer, costs $2,200 using a credit card, it has an APR of 19.99%. How long will it take you to pay off the computer if you make regular monthly payments of $40? How much will you pay in the long run for the computer if you make those monthly payments of $40? Then let's see if you double it, how long will it take to pay off, and how much will you actually pay if you're now doing monthly payments of $80? Okay, so we plug everything into the account, into the formula, right? We've got our $40 payment. We've got our $2,200 was the amount that we borrowed. Our APR of 19.99 is 0.1999, right? Our our N is 12 because we're making monthly payments. And we plug all that in to solve for R, which is basically, how long, how many months it takes. And it comes out to be 150 months or 12 and a half years. That's a long time. And if you then take that 150 months, multiply it by 40, you see that you end up spending $6,000 for a $2,200 purchase. Yikes, right? Now if we double it and pay $80 a month, we get it done in 37 months, or a little over 37 months. What this means is the 38th month, you're going to have, your balance is going to be less than $80 left, right? So you would just pay less than 80 and it would be paid off. And if we plug 37 months times 80, we see that you only end up paying $2,960 total for a $2,200. So, you still end up paying $760 extra, but that's a lot better, right, than paying almost $4,000 extra. So, again, if you learn nothing from some of these, learn that interest is a killer, so you want to pay off things as soon as possible to pay less interest, and you want to start investing as soon as possible to make interest work for you. Okay, fixed installment loans, they just have a fixed interest rate and are paid off with monthly payments over a specified amount of time. There's not a lot of them in the real world, but you can find them. A down payment is a cash payment that you put up front towards some sort of big purchase price. Usually, large things like cars and homes require down payments. Now, the monthly payment formula for fixed installment loans. This basically figures out what your monthly payment is going to be based on the scenario of your loan. And you can see it's very similar to what we've seen before. This is kind of the standard formula for I'm going to borrow X amount of money and I need to pay it back in so many years. This would be what you would use for a mortgage, let's say, or a car payment. right? So those types of things usually, you have to have your house paid off in 30 years. You have to have your car paid off in 5 years, those kinds of things. So there's a fixed number of payments you're going to make because it needs to be paid off in a fixed amount of time. So you've got P is your principal, right? R is your interest rate as a decimal, as always. N is the number of payments per year, or 12. And then T is time in years. And you can see it's very similar to the compound interest formula, except instead of being raised to the NT, it's being raised to the negative NT, right? And you got this little extra 1 minus thing going on. Pretty easy formula to work with, especially if you know how to use Excel or Google Sheets. You can throw it into there really easily and compute things. Let's say Kelly wishes to purchase a new car. The car she chose has a price of $34,000, including tax and fees. So basically, we say that's her total amount. We talk about that's how much it is out the door, right? Out the door just always means including all extra fees and stuff. So taxes and fees are included. So that's the grand total of what she needs to pay. She chooses to make a down payment of 20% of the purchase price and then wants to finance the remainder. If she's acquired an APR of 3.99% for 72-month loan, so what is the amount of her monthly payment? This is actually a really good real-world question, because if you're going to go buy a car, it'd be kind of nice to figure out if you can afford the payments or not. So first thing we do is figure out what 20% of the 34 grand is, and that's $6,800. So she's going to plunk down $6,800 in the very beginning, which means she only needs to finance the remaining $27,200. So that's going to be your P. Now she's got 72-month loan, which is 6 years, so T is 6. The APR is 3.99 or 0.0399. Throw all of that into our formula, and you see that her monthly payment would round up, right, because you always round to the nearest penny, $425.43. And what's going to happen is most likely her last payment, that 72nd payment, is going to be like 425.37 or something, right? So there's going to be a few cents that kind of accumulate along the way. So it's going to be a little bit less, but not enough to really worry about it. So that would be your monthly payment, a little over $425 a month. Now let's see if you can redo this with some different numbers, right? So now you're going to buy a truck that costs 48 grand. You're going to put down 10 grand, so that means you're going to finance the other 38,000. Your APR is quite a bit higher at 5%, and you're going to do it for quite a bit shorter, only 48. So we know that our monthly payment is going to go up substantially. So work it out, see what you get. You should have got $875.11. So you can see that it did go up a lot, remember, because A, we were borrowing more, B, our interest pay was higher, and C, our amount of time was less, right? All of those things make it go up. Dean gets to choose from one of the new car incentives when he purchases his car next week. He can either choose 0.9% APR financing for 60 months or $1,500 cash back with a 3.75 APR over 48 months. We can compare these two incentives and see which one kind of saves you the most money, right? So this is a really good real-world question because we have these types of kind of competing incentives at dealerships all the time. So it's nice to be able to figure out which one is better for you. So here's kind of what you would expect to see as the advertisement, that what you could do versus what you can get. So with this scenario, the car that's being, or the amount that's being financed, is $27,465. So that could be the actual price of the car. That could be the price of the car, minus money put down. But as you can see in this example, we're putting $5,000 down so that we're only going to finance the $22,465. So this must have been how much the car was out the door. So this is how much we'll have to finance. So first we take that, plug it in with the 9%, the 0.9%, right? It was 0.9% interest for 5 years. See that our monthly payment is $383.04. If we take that $383.04 and multiply it by all the payments, now if we're doing monthly payments for 5 years, that's 60 total payments. And we see that we end up paying $22,982.40. Option B is the APR is 3.75, but he can use $1,500 cash back to add to his down payment. So now he's got the $27,465, subtracting the $5,000 that he has, subtract the $1,500 they give him. Now he's going to finance $20,965. Plug that into the formula. Higher interest rate, less amount of time, right? Only 4 years, so 48 months. We get a higher payment of $471. But then we take that 471, we multiply it by 48, and we see that we get 22,609. So if we compare it, we can see which one is better. So option B only saves his money if he's disciplined and puts the cash back that he received towards the purchase of the car. However, the car is completely paid off an entire year earlier with this option. You'll also need to consider which monthly payment option you can afford. And all things remaining equal, like if you could afford either option as far as the monthly payments are concerned, you want to look at which one ends up costing you the most. And so you would want to go back and compare, okay, this is how much money I spent in my payments, plus my $5,000 down, right? With the previous example, this is how much I ended up paying, plus the money that I put down. So you can see that there's not a huge difference, right? So option A was $22,982.40, almost $23,000. And then option B was $22,600, so about $400 less. So you end up saving about $400 in the long run, but that also means you have a much higher monthly payment, and it's paid off quicker. So that would be something to consider. Option B saves you money. How about calculating monthly mortgage payments? So William and Helen are preparing to buy a new home in the Midwestern United States. They've saved $21,300 for a down payment. The total price of the house is $131,800, including taxes and fees. So again, you can think of that as the out-the-door price, right? Find their monthly mortgage payment if the fixed interest rate is 3.52% for a 30-year loan. Well, first we got to figure out how much they're going to finance. So we take the price, we subtract the down payment. We can see they're only going to finance $110,500. Put all the rest of the stuff into the formula. Remember, your APR is always as a decimal and is always 12 because we're always doing monthly payments. Did it for 30 years, and we see that we're paying $497.43, or about $500 a month, to pay off the home. Now, here's something that most lenders don't tell you. You're paying $500 a month, right? Most people, if they can afford $500 a month, they could just as easily afford $250 every 2 weeks, right? Because there's roughly 4 weeks in a month. And it's called making bi-monthly payments. So, 2 per month. If, you go to get a mortgage or any kind of loan, and your lender will allow you to do this. Say, hey, I want to pay half of it in the middle of the month and the second half, so you're basically every 2 weeks I'm paying this amount, and you just have it kind of like automatically taken out of your savings account, where your checking account, where your paycheck and stuff is being deposited. So you don't even think about it. Just every 2 weeks, 250 comes out. 250 comes out. What happens is, if you actually do the math, there's 52 weeks in a month. You divide that by 2, that's 26. You're actually making 26 payments, 26 half payments. So you take half of 26, and that's 13, not 12. So you end up making a whole extra month's worth of payments, right? Because you end up making the equivalent of 13 months of payments in a year instead of 12 months, right? Because a month isn't exactly 2 weeks. It's got a little extra, right? It's roughly 30 to 31 days. That adds up a lot. You don't really feel it much in your budget, because you're doing half every 2 weeks, and it really doesn't make a difference, to how you're living. But in the end, a 30-year mortgage, if you pay every 2 weeks, it usually pays it off in about 17 years. You cut it almost in half. So it's a huge way to save money. Just think of it. You would, instead of making $500 payments for 360 months, right? 360 of these, multiply this by 360. You would only multiply it by 12 times 17. You almost pay half as much for your home. So just keep that in mind, that making those twice monthly or every 2 week payments makes a huge improvement on how much money you're actually going to pay in the long run. Okay, maximum purchase price formula. All that we've done is we've taken this formula here and solved it so that we can figure out how much our payment can be given, or how much we can borrow given what we want to buy, right? So how much we can afford per month. We're basically solving for P. We're solving for how much money we can borrow. So you can see that Now we've got payment times a bunch of stuff equals maximum purchase price. This is just our P. So if you kind of think about it, if you kind of took this P and stuck it out here, right, because it's P times, you got P times this fraction. So to solve for P, you just multiply the reciprocal of the fraction over times payment, and here we go, payment times the reciprocal. So this, if we do all this, it'll tell us how much we can afford to buy a house for, right? So like, you know, that I can only afford $300 a month, and I know what the interest rate is. So I calculate this, and it tells me what my purchase price can be, basically how much I can borrow, and it won't, you know, bankrupt me. So for instance, you take home $32.20 per month, so that's how much you take home after taxes, right? You wish to stay within the recommended guidelines for mortgage payments by only spending a quarter of your take-home pay on a house payment. So you have $15,300 saved for a down payment. You know that you can only afford a quarter of this per month, and the current APR that your bank is offering for mortgages is 3.37%. So now we can figure out the total cost of a house you can afford with a 15-year mortgage and the total amount you can afford with the traditional 30-year mortgage. The first thing we got to calculate is what our monthly payments is, right? What we can afford. Payments is what our monthly payments are, or what a monthly payment is. So we take the $32.20, multiply it by 25%, or basically divide it by 4, and we can see that we can spend $805 a month. That's one quarter of our take-home. That's pretty standard. Some people say you can go up to a third, but really it's safest to stay at a quarter because, you know, things happen, and all of a sudden you get, you know, like your car breaks down, you have to pay a bunch of money to fix it. You want to make sure that you aren't strapped for cash because you're paying so much every month. They call it being house poor, right? That you're paying so much for your monthly mortgage that you don't have any money to do anything else. So it's better to keep it at that 25%. Okay, so now we know what our monthly payment can be of $805. We can put in the interest rate of 0.0337, do the 15 years, and we can see that, you know, that comes out to $113,617, and then we would add in the amount that we would have for a down payment, and that tells us we could afford a house that is right at about $129,000. That's at 15 years. If we instead finance it over 30 years, we get $182,201 for 30 years. Then we add in our down payment, and we get $197,500. And you're like, wait a minute, I went from $128,900 to $197,500. Yeah, big difference, right? So 30 years really spreads things out, and it lets you get a lot more bang for your buck. But also remember that because it's a much longer loan, in the long run, you're paying, you know, those payments twice, right? You're basically paying twice as much, $805 for 30 years instead of 15. So you end up spending a whole lot of extra money for that house. So just keep that in mind. And again, doing that every 2 weeks trick will then cut it back down to 17, and you'll be back to, you know, paying basically the smaller amount, this amount, even though you bought the more expensive house. Haha, right? Okay, so you can, as I said, the amount is considerably more than the 15-year, and so that's because of how compound interest works. So some good financial habits is always make a budget, stick to the budget, control your impulse spending, which is what it means to stick to that budget. Always have some sort of emergency fund. You never know when your car is going to break down. You never know when you're going to get sick and, you know, you need to pay some hospital bills. Be a smart consumer. That just means do your research. Don't buy the first shiniest computer that you see that's on sale. Do some research. See if maybe there's a cheaper option that's just as good. You know, those kinds of things. Keep an eye on your account and pay your bills on time. Paying your bills on time is a big, huge thing, because not only does it hurt your credit when you don't, but then you get hit with late fees and interest and all that kind of stuff. So it's always cheaper to pay them on time. And monitoring your accounts is always a good idea, because there's a lot of identity theft going on out there. So you always want to just, you know, look at your credit card statement every month and make sure that you don't see any charges that you don't recognize, because it's really easy for people to get a hold of your credit card number, and then they can just start making some small charges. You know, they'll make a small charge here and there, and then if, you know, nothing happens, then they'll make a couple more, and then a couple bigger ones, and then pretty soon they're going to make a $5,000 charge on it, and you're like, oh my God, now I'm, you know, out. I have to pay this thing off, right? So just keep an eye on it. And then, ask questions of people who know, like financial advisors or, other people that you know that know about this stuff. And that's all I got for you.